final entry in the quote-unquote bear family is Volvidon. Volvidon is sort of a pangolin, armadillo, anteater type creature. You fight it in the higher temperature areas of the game, and it can attack by rolling up into a ball and trying to land on you or run you over. It's got a long tongue that can stretch out, and I think this one steals from you. Kind of like Chameleos. And it can also inflict paralysis with its spit. Volvidon's interesting. In all the games it showed up in, it's been sort of a mid-tier monster, not too difficult, but its gear was also useful, so you found yourself hunting it more often than some of the other ones. I'm going to put Volvidon on low B tier. I'm going to put it above... I'm going to put it above Shengaoren here. Definitely above average monster. I wouldn't mind seeing Volvidon show up in future games. I think I've talked about it on previous videos for Monster Hunter, but what I'd like to see in later games is a large-scale monster using the bear skeleton. Even Arzuros, which is larger on average, the Red Helm version, they're not as big as some of the other large targets. I'd like to see a real big bear-type creature using that skeleton and see what they do with the moveset. I think that could be interesting. We'll see. The whole idea that they're adapting yokai designs, and for some of the cast and rise, maybe we'll see some sort of bear yokai monster show up. Moving on, we are officially entering the exception of couple, the Leviathans. Leviathans tend to be water-dwelling, amphibious-type creatures with long body shapes. The first of these is Royal Ludroth. Royal Ludroth is an early game target from Tri, and it's basically a big lizard-like creature with this big spongy mane that absorbs water, and it'll try and body slam you or roll over you or spit water. Serves as a good early game target to introduce the player to the mechanics. Royal Ludroth is fine. I think it looks cool, and the fight is pretty manageable. I'm going to put Royal Ludroth up here on B tier. I'm going to put it below Volvidon. It's sort of a punching bag monster, but I feel like it does enough to make it stand out a bit. And its roar is pretty interesting too. It's an interesting combination of sound effects that they use for Royal Ludroth's roar. It sounds like a bird almost. The subspecies, Purple Ludroth. Purple Ludroth is annoying. It's almost the same moveset as Royal Ludroth, just with poison attacks. I don't think I'd rate this one as high, but it does have a neat design, so I'm not going to drop it down too far. I'm going to put it down here below Dread Queen. Keeping the poison types together. It's not bad, but it doesn't really do a whole lot differently than the standard version. It's just a more annoying creature. Next up, in the Leviathan family, we've got a monster that debuted in Tri and was only in the 3rd generation of games. We have Gobel. Gobel, to me, is one of the more memorable creatures from the 3rd generation of Monster Hunter. It's basically a large pufferfish / anglerfish that's amphibious. You encounter it in the water stages, and you can fight it on land too. And it has sort of this flat, almost halibut-like body when it's wandering around normally. And then when you make it mad, it inflates and a bunch of spikes pop out of it like a pufferfish. And it can steamroll you in that state, or it can try and pounce on you. I think it can inflict poison with its tail spikes. It's been a long time since I fought one of those. Sort of lantern thing on its head can also be used like a flashbang. Gobel is an interesting combination of attributes, and I don't think there's been a monster really quite like it. It's just a shame, since it really could benefit from a redesign and maybe show up in future games. I did see that one of its cousins is not on the list here, so I will address that next. But Gobel, I'm going to put Gobel up here on upper B tier. It's a really cool monster that I hope to see some more of in the future. I'm going to put it behind Sadius. Very memorable monster, decently challenging fight. So we'll see. The cousin for Gobel, that's considered a Leviathan, I don't see on here in any form, is Nibblesnarf. Nibblesnarf is a desert cousin to Gobel. It's a sort of large, derpy-looking sandfish that swims through the desert dunes. It can sort of come up at your feet and bite you, or it can blast you with a sand cannon. Nibblesnarf was, despite having kind of a stupid name, was not a bad fight. If I were to rate it on the tier list here, I think I would put it on lower B tier. Probably right around here. Maybe after Royal Ludroth. I like the fact that you can blow Nibblesnarf out of the sand with bombs and you fish it with a fishing pole. Weird that it's not on here since it's been in a bunch of games. Oh well. Moving on, the Leviathan family, we've got the Monster Hunter Tri flagship. We have Legiacris. Legiacris is probably one of my favorite flagships on the list here. All the flagships rate very highly for me, and Logi's no different. You fight this big sort of sea serpent creature, both on water and on land. It has the ability to spit lightning or call lightning down around its body, sort of like a defensive mechanism. And overall, it's a good mix of cool design and challenging fight. A lot of people were really disappointed to not see Legiacris show up in the current generation. From what the devs have said, they had issues with the skeleton for the Leviathans functioning with the physics of Monster Hunter World and its engine. As a result, there weren't any Leviathan types in there, which is a shame because there's some good ones coming up. But on the tier list, I'm putting Logi up here on S tier. I think I'm rating it higher than Seregios. I don't think I rate it higher than Gore. It's kind of a toss-up between these two. Overall, great monsters. I really hope we see the Leviathans return and Rise. They get a chance to work out the bugs with the engine, because they were some of my favorite monsters in the series, as we'll get to here. Next up, sort of inexplicably in between all these other ones, we have Great Roggy. Great Roggy is the poison counterpart to Great Jaggy, and the later gen equivalent of Eodrome over here. Great Roggy improves on the Eodrome design in so many different ways. It's got this sort of dart frog-like throat pouch that inflates. It primarily uses poison, which is why I say it's like Eodrome. But overall, it's just more memorable and more interesting of a fight. As a result, I'm going to put Great Roggy up here on the same tier as Great Jaggy. I'm going to put it behind Great Jaggy, just because it's Great Jaggy's a little more iconic in my eyes. But overall, Great Roggy, good design, good fight. Going back to the Leviathan family, we've got Ivory Legiacris. This is a subspecies for regular Logi. And in 3 and 3U, primarily 3U because Ivory wasn't in regular Tri. In 3U, Ivory was introduced as sort of a land-based cousin or subspecies to regular Legiacris. It's not a different element. It's still a thunder element and uses electricity, but it primarily stays on land, and its moveset was a little bit different. I think Ivory Legiacris has a cool design, and its fight was decently challenging too. So while it doesn't do a whole lot differently, it is a good subspecies. So I'm going to put it in the middle of the pack here on C tier. In Monster Hunter 4U? I think it was in 4U. It wasn't in 4U. It was definitely in Generations. They sort of added some new attacks to the Logis that made them more interesting because there was no more water combat. So I think that sort of bolsters the rating for Ivory as well. Next up, we have the rare species for the Legiathans family. This is Abyssal Logi. Abyssal Logi is one of the endgame targets in 3U, 3 Ultimate. This monster is fought entirely underwater, in a similar arena that you fight the final phase of the Cedeus fight. And Abyssal Logi is very difficult. It uses a bunch of sort of vortex type attacks. It can hit you with electricity from anywhere. It's a definitely high tier difficulty monster, and it looks really cool. There were some cheese strats that you could do to make farming it easier, but if you're fighting it legit, it was definitely no pushover. As a result, I'm going to put the rare species up here, higher tier than the subspecies. I'm going to put Abyssal up here next to Cedeus. I like its design, the sort of dark blue and black with the red highlights for its eyes. It's definitely a pretty good combination of colors, and overall the fight was pretty challenging. That one, I remember spending a lot of time fighting endgame in 3U. So yeah, good stuff. Upper B tier for Abyssal Logi. Next up, we've got another one of the Leviathans. This is a fire-based Leviathan. This is Agnactor. This monster we've not seen in the current generation of games, but it has sort of a long salamander-like body and a sort of clacky beak and a long sail-like fin. Agnactor is an interesting design, and it's an interesting fight. Definitely challenging since it debuted in Tri. It would burrow underground and sort of dive all around the volcanic map. It could burrow into the ceiling. It had a couple fire beam attacks like Gravios that it could do. Sort of like a more interesting Gravios fight. So I'm going to put Agna up on A tier. I think I'm going to put it... I'm going to put it above Kutku over here. I would like to see that particular monster come back in the later gen, assuming they figure out how to get the Leviathan skeletons working. I'd bet money that we'll see, if they can do that, we'll probably see both Legiathans and Agnactor in another game. That's my guess. Next up, we have the subspecies for Agnactor. This is Glacial Agnactor. As the name suggests, you fight this one in the Icy Tundra region. It has a similar move set. It does have a similar armor mechanic, one thing I didn't mention. Agnactor has lava armor that hardens over time, sort of like Leviathans, but it spends so much time going in and out of lava, it's never really a big deal. It's definitely not as annoying of a fight as Leviathans, that's for sure. Glacial Agnactor has the inverse mechanic to its armor in that it comes out of the ice with fully frozen armor, and the longer it stays out, the more its armor thaws and becomes easier to hit. Overall, it's pretty... Overall, pretty good subspecies.